Michelago Station is arguably the best kept abandoned train station in Australia. Today I'm here to uncover what's so special about this station, and trust me, you'll be surprised at how new it looks. For a station built in 1887, for one that hasn't had running trains since the 80s, it's surprisingly well kept. It almost looks brand new, and I want to find out why it's so well maintained even after all these years. And while I'm at it, I'm going to check out the tiny little town of Michelago, population 600. Cancer and lung disease hazard. Okay, I'm going to do something which seems rebellious, so I wonder what's inside here. Now I hope the locals don't mind a weirdo walking around with a camera. So here we are, I've arrived in the tiny little town of Michelago, around maybe 45 minutes from Canberra, maybe 4 hours from Sydney, and it is a really tiny town. It's got a population of around 600 people. Now what makes this town special, as I said, is the railway station, built in the late 1800s. Hasn't seen a train since the 80s. So immediately the building stands out as it's quite a unique orange looking colour, and this colour was common across train stations in New South Wales during the late 1800s. I mean, I don't know if they used that colour back in the day, but definitely any station like this from this time period is this colour usually. Now if you just came here and you didn't know any better, you'd probably assume that the train station was still in use. Like, it really looks like it's still being used. So Michelago Station was built in 1887 and it ran continuously for about 100 years until the 80s when they just stopped running trains through here. And the thing that strikes me about this place is they really do maintain it quite well. I don't know what makes it so special that they need to keep it maintained. I mean, I'm not complaining, it's nice. It's just don't get why. I mean, it's not really a tourist attraction, unless you're me. Let's take a walk around the station and see what we can find. I'd really like to go inside and have a look, but unfortunately all the doors are locked today. So I wonder what's inside here. Okay, public toilets. Contains asbestos fibres, avoid creating dust, cancer and lung disease hazard. Okay, I won't be making any dust. Now this is the old iconic sign, I guess. Michelago. So yeah, as I said, it was built in 1887 and it's quite, you can tell it would have been used quite a lot just due to the fact it looks quite well built and it looks quite nice, especially compared to some of the other stations along this train line. Like, some of them are just a simple little wooden platform. This place is quite similar to many stations that you can find today in Sydney, like Strathfield, for example. It looks very similar to that. But this one's really nicely done. It's, I think it's like Federation architecture. We have a nice little hill in the background. I'm going to call it the Mount Fuji of Michelago. Now, why did they stop using it? I guess, well, obviously it wasn't needed anymore. Probably the need for these sorts of places just disappeared. So we used to rely a lot more on agriculture to run our economy, and these stations would have been used back in the day to transport cattle, sheep, I suppose, that sort of thing. But you know, we've diversified our economy since then, so we don't rely that much on agriculture anymore. And because of that, well, we don't really need these stations in the middle of nowhere anymore. But yeah, as I said, it's really well maintained for a station that hasn't seen a single train since the 80s. I'm going to do something which seems rebellious, but there's zero harm in doing this. Now if you walk along the tracks, that are actually in use in New South Wales, you'll get whopped with a massive fine. I mean, it's not just the fine, you might die. It's really a quaint little station, and this sort of architecture I think is unique to Australia. I could be wrong on that, but it's definitely a trademark. This would be a cool place to throw a party. You know, just bring along your own barbecue, some booze, bring a Bluetooth speaker, because it's completely empty and I doubt anyone really ever comes here. Standing here, you almost expect to hear a train pulling up or a sound like dun dun dun, the next stop is. But of course a sound like that hasn't been heard for probably at least 40 years. So apparently the station is maintained by volunteers who pay the rent and electricity. Well done to those people, they've done a good job. I'm going to head just down the road to see what goes on in a town of 600 people in rural Australia. I know this is going to sound weird, but I just saw a rock that looks so cool. What is it, like quartz or something? I don't know. Now I hope the locals don't mind a weirdo walking around with a camera. The old Michelago Rural Fire Brigade. I bet that gets a lot of use around here. We have a little abandoned bus stop here. I don't know how old this is. It looks like it's probably from the 70s or 80s. Now, if I was bald and bankrupt, I'd be going ape over this. He'd be like, whoa, Soviet bus stop. So I suppose this is just a community space that people can use. Basically this place was settled in the early 1800s by ex-convicts, and they were given land grants in this area. And it does have a little bit of a history with crime. Apparently in 1866, a local bushranging gang held up the local town. So they held up the hotel, a police station, and the local store, as well as a Catholic schoolhouse and church. And apparently they drank the entire liquor store before leaving. Then in 1866, the post office was robbed by an armed robbery. But yeah, that's our history. That's the history of Australia, you know? Criminals doing criminal stuff, right? Now I know they have a quaint little general store not too far from here. Maybe we can go check that out. The Michelago General Store, established in 1989. It doesn't look like it's open today, what a shame. Well, unfortunately, it looks like the world-famous Michelago General Store is closed today. On the one day I decided to come. That's all right. That's okay. Imagine if you lived here and this is your only shop around for like a 40-minute drive, and it just happened to be closed. Of course, the one day that I come here. We have a little war memorial here. So this is residents of the local town that fought in World War I and died. It's a lot of people for only a town of 600. Abandoned chairs here. They look like they're out of Soviet Russia or something. Look at that, it's probably from the 80s. Now people probably would have sat on these waiting for their trains. So this is St. Patrick's Catholic Church, and it would have been the local church for Michelago. Now the original church here was built in the late 1800s, and it eventually became too small for the local community, so they had to rebuild it, and that's where we got this one from. And this church was built in 1906 for a grand total of £1,134 and 6 shillings. Because, you know, back then Australia used pounds, not dollars. In today's money, that's equivalent to cha-ching. It's quite a nice looking church. It's just a little bit, you can tell it's not that well cared for. It'd look a lot better if they cared for it. You can see the stained glass windows have just been barred up with metal. Yeah, so the original was built in the late 1800s, and it's just over there, but unfortunately someone has a house right next to it, so I don't really want to film it too much. Don't want to invade their privacy, you know, so, but you can see it just over here. So there it is, Michelago, tiny little town frozen in time. Not much to do here, especially if you happen to come when the general store's closed. But it might just be worth the trip to see one of the best preserved abandoned stations in Australia. Just make sure you have transport, because there aren't any trains to get you home.